is Pat McDonald, your host for Vote for Vermont, where our tagline is Listening Beyond the Soundbites. We're continuing with our candidate series, and joining me tonight is Bruce Busa, who is an independent for the U.S. State Senate. Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Nice to see you again. Before we get into a little bit about who you are, you've got to tell folks right off the bat about the debate you're in this evening.
Okay, this evening, all 9 United States Senate candidates, including Bernie and Lawrence Upin, the Republican, will all be in Winooski for Channel 17 live, and it starts at 5:30 p.m. And it'll also be on YouTube live, so you can find Channel 17's YouTube channel.
That's
and
great.
Go from there.
Yes, and if they can't see it tonight, I'm sure it'll be replayed it'll be on YouTube.
It'll be replayed. When I get the link, it'll be on my Facebook channel, and I'll link it over also.
Great, because I think that's going to be an interesting debate, so I think you should check it out. I'm so glad we have so many candidates. That's really cool.
Yeah, and we all have our little thing to bring up, which really, when you put it all together, it's like, there's some interesting things here.
Well, that's why I got, I guess this is Channel 17, but VPR's had 1 or 2, and they haven't included all of the candidates. And I've interviewed several, and every one of them, like you said, has some really good ideas that should be out there, and maybe whoever wins would take those ideas and put them into play.
Exactly. I've heard some of the other candidates bring up some of the things I've brought up and other people have brought up. So we do complement each other.
That's great.
And it's good to have us all together and to do it.
I think so too, especially for places that take public money.
Yeah,
I think they should.
And the ones where we've been excluded, those things have been being brought up in discussion. They'll probably be discussed further.
Good. I hope so, because I don't think that's fair, because you've got the same petition that they have. The leading, the leading party candidates filled out, so you're a candidate.
Yeah, and we have some unique things that they don't have.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. So could you tell the viewers a little bit about yourself? We always ask our guests to start off that way.
Yeah, Bruce Busa here from Reedsboro, Vermont, and I moved to Vermont about 32 years ago and grew roots. Transplants grow roots also.
That's me.
So here we are, and I got my grandfather's blood in me, and my great-grandfather on my mother's side immigrated from Italy, southern Italy, and my great-grandmother's side came in from Germany. And on my dad's side, my grandfather was from northern Italy. He fought against Mussolini. He was a militiaman, a citizen, and just fighting for freedom. And my grandmother on my dad's side is immigrant from Ireland.
Wow.
So yeah, that's how we got here, and we just kept getting shoved north because I guess we just don't get along with dense populated areas. I think we're too vocal for some people. Yes. So we can only go so far. Ethan Allen only made it so far too, and here we are,
Good for you.
So when we start getting shoved now, we start shoving back. It's what I've been seeing from a lot of the Vermonters in the hills here. And we're starting to be boisterous and run for office.
That's good. Good for you. Well, that's the next question, because you've picked a very difficult race to run in, because Senator Sanders has certainly been a well-known incumbent for a long time here in Vermont. So what made you decide to run for Senate and also obviously to run against Bernie?
Well, I like to help people run. So I get to look to see who's running, and I want to pick somebody to help. And when I was cruising through the United States Senate, there was just no one there who I could vote for. And there was a few independent candidates, and Bernie was there, but that was it at the time. And then I took the papers out, and since then, more people have joined the race. And so I do agree with a few of the things some of the other candidates say and all. But we had already done the paperwork, and it's like, here we are, we're going to go forward. And we're going forward, and we're bringing forth the things that we see, and like we were saying before, the more of us who bring our redress of grievance, that's what we're all about here.
Well, the one thing we've lost in Vermont, I must say, when I was in the legislature, we'd say that the best bill is the third bill. Your bill, my bill, and the compromise bill. And we don't do that as often as we should anymore, because everybody's got good ideas and good intentions. When you wake up in the morning, you want the best for Vermont. And you may disagree with your neighbor, but we all want the best.
Well, that's my motto,
What is that?
Can't we just get along?
Oh, well, there you go. That's it.
You know, I'm not you, you're not me. You
Right.
do things I don't do. I probably do things you don't do, but we're
Right.
neighbors. We ought to be
That's
able to
right.
get along.
And this is Vermont.
Yeah, and that's in the United States Constitution under ensure the domestic tranquility. Yeah.
What? So can you?
Get along with your neighbors,
Oh, well, there you go.
right? Ensure the domestic tranquility. But when I look at what's going on in Washington, especially with our current United States Senator, there's
Yeah.
just stirring the domestic turmoil.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons I'm running for United States Senate also, because our current senator is just turmoil, turmoil, turmoil. You know, revolution this, revolution that. And really, we need to get back to the basics, back to our Constitution that's holding us together instead of throwing it apart and just going who knows where.
Right. They seem to not be looking the other way with some of these issues on the Constitution. They just sort of go, what? You know, what Constitution?
Exactly.
So between you and Senator Sanders, I shouldn't call him Bernie, should be respectful here. But what is the difference you see between him and your opinions and what you would do in the Senate?
Well, it'd probably be shorter if I told you where we were the same, similar.
Okay.
Which
No.
he recognizes there's problems, and I recognize there's problems also. So solving those problems, he would solve it with a lot of government, where I would solve it with giving the people more freedom to solve it themselves. Because
I like that.
what I've seen is we really need to get to the point where we trust our citizens to do what they do, survive, basically. I mean, you got to survive in life, and while you're going through that, you create your own job or whatever you do. What I see government doing a lot is getting in the way and tripping them up of their progress, right? And as long as it's clean air, clean water, clean food, and good clean dirt, I think we should be able to let our citizens do what they need to do,
There you go. That's great.
you know?
So you've talked about those four things. You're very much in support of a clean environment, I'm gathering,
Well, yes, because it's part of health.
right?
Right, if you've got dirty water, we just down in Hoosick Falls, New York, and North Bennington with the dirty water, they were treating cancer.
Right.
They were treating the symptom, but you got to get to the root. And it was the water, had the plastics in it, and
Yeah.
it was causing these things. And well, we got to get back. So my philosophy is it's like a cradle to grave philosophy. If a company creates something, they need to be responsible for when it's done being used, to take it back
Right.
and recycle it or reuse it or take ownership of the waste somehow.
When I moved to Vermont, I heard that Vermont has the highest rate of breast cancer in women, and I subsequently was dealing with that myself, and I've always thought it was environmental, because what do we all share in common throughout the state? I mean, we don't all eat the same food or from the same source, but something in the
Well,
air or the
what we
water.
put in our bodies, either
Yeah.
through air, water, or food, it's
Yep, it is.
it's what we're putting in us. And yes, I
Right.
do focus on those areas myself.
You told me when we had talked before that you were really having fun going out and talking to people and meeting them, and that you kind of find something in common with folks. What are you hearing from them when you get them behind that kitchen door? Because I know I speak louder in my
Yeah.
kitchen door than I do maybe out on the street.
Well, I have to tell you, Pat, it depends whether you're in the city or if you're on the hill.
Ah, that's interesting.
If you're on the hill, it's pretty straightforward. Where in the world, how did we get here?
Right.
You know, and when I bring up my biggest concern, the secular, humanistic, progressive socialism, which progresses to what? Godless communism.
Yeah.
You know, the old folk, who I like old folk because they have a lot of wisdom and they've seen a lot. And I'm almost getting there
I was going to
myself.
say thank you for that.
But there's so much wisdom you get from the people who have seen it, who've lived it, and it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
And when I speak, they connect with me. And it's like, yeah, where are we going now, you know? But are we willing to go there and deal with some of these issues? And the moral issues of the country, where it's been pulled out from under us, are we willing to go there and see the result of what happened? You know, and that's where I think we need to go, because it's the base of so many things that happen.
have they given up a little bit on our government? I mean, they're all going to vote. They're going to get out and vote, and they think their vote makes a difference, I hope?
Well, yeah, the people I've talked to,
Good.
and a lot of them, even the younger folk, it's like, you know what, Bernie's been there long enough. It's
Oh,
time to
really?
get some new blood in here. And I was surprised, some of the people, because you go around, I kind of look and say, oh yeah, I'll stop that person there, and some people, oh, I'll stop that person, but some of the people I thought wouldn't respond well have really responded very well.
Oh, that's great.
And if I could get to all the little communities in Vermont, it would be good.
Yeah.
But I still have a full-time job,
Yeah,
so
yes. Well, you didn't explain. I thought that was interesting. Could you just explain for a minute what you do? Because you were throwing out some pretty big words when we were talking.
yeah. So I work hydroelectric power, converting the energy and water stored at a higher elevation to lower, and converting that energy to electricity.
Great.
So in the process, we turn turbines, and I've got two equipment that I work on, governors and regulators.
That's it, right?
Right? And that's how I look at
love-
government.
Exactly.
So the governor is what brings the machine up to speed by opening gates, and we have to synchronize it to the line. So there's a lot of equipment to do that. The power end is the governor, and the voltage end is the regulators, voltage regulators. So in the governor, we have a thing called a PID loop. Proportional means I need to get here. The integrator says, well, how long do we want to take to get there over time? And the derivative is we use the inverse derivative. It says it's the rate of change. Well, let's not go too quick, we're going to break something.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about those three things, you get feedback of the opposite polarity. So when you do the math, electrical math, once you get up there, the math, all those things end up being zero as if they're not there, but they're all working still. So you have like 6 inputs of opposite polarity, all still working. And I look at this as being the people bringing forth their redress of grievance or speaking or bringing forth their positions. You need all that stuff to keep
Level.
stability.
Excellent.
If you lose something, you start to go out of control.
Right.
And likewise, that's the power end. And the electrical end, it's the same thing for the voltage regulators, which I look at the Senate and the House as being. And the resistive portion is the proportional, the capacitive is the overtime, and the inductive is the opposition to change, the derivative. So it's true in those things, but when I look at things in science and life, those things are in everything, especially in politics.
Right, exactly.
That's why we see people, well, we want to go here, and they don't get there. They just keep trying. That's their integration. They're trying to integrate their views.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they're trying to wear out the people with the other side, and that's the challenge.
Right.
So you have to recognize if you're on the other side, you got to stay there. You got to keep it.
Yep.
And that's the challenge. They can wear you out,
Interesting job, for sure. I love that you correlated it to the politics, and it makes sense.
It's science. It's
Yeah.
actually the laws of nature.
There you go, which is everywhere, as you said.
Yes.
So if you're fortunate enough to win, you're going to go to Congress, and they've got so many issues that they're facing right now. I thought if I could just list a couple of them, and you can pick and choose which one you would, but the economy, obviously, and regulations. Immigration, that's a huge one. It may be very huge in about a month when these folks get to our borders. Tariffs, gun control. I know you're very interested in healthcare, and I would like you to take some time to talk about international relations, especially with Islam, as I
Okay.
know we've talked about that.
Yeah.
So you can pick and choose.
All right, let me
Or
just
talk 'em all if
fly
you'd
through
like.
my
Yes,
list, see if we can
exactly.
hit them.
Yes.
So, ensure domestic tranquility, and that's where I think Congress is supposed to be doing, because it's in the preamble of the Constitution. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, that would be fun, forming a more perfect
There's a
union
concept, right?
where we all have the same goal. That's why I say
Exactly.
we have to focus on the Constitution. Establish justice. We see in the country some people are not receiving the justice that I think that they deserve. I think sometimes, we get talking about racial injustice.
Mm-hmm.
I would be willing to go there and entertain that challenge.
Have that discussion.
Yes.
Yep.
And I think I would enjoy going there
Right.
and
Well,
getting
if it is
into it.
occurring, and I have no reason to believe it's not occurring, we
Mhm.
should fix it. I personally don't know how, because I'm not directly faced with it, but I think it's something that should be fixed for sure.
I think I would be able to communicate with both sides,
Right.
which is what's needed,
Yep.
you know, and go from there. Ensure domestic tranquility. That would be great. Provide for the common defense. This is the borders,
That's right.
right? The borders, we see what's going on now. We need borders
Right.
that people
Right.
just aren't going to walk over and not know what's going on. And because there's some things going on, if we knew who was coming in, we could actually utilize them or help them learn how to. If you're a refugee, that means you're escaping from
Right,
somewhere
right.
because there's some danger.
Right.
Well, maybe they don't want to come to America. Maybe they would rather have their home country
Right. fixed.
straighten
Right,
out.
That's right.
So we could help in that matter. And if they're leaving there, there's probably a hole in there. Maybe we could help fill that with why they're coming here. They're coming here for freedom and justice. Well, maybe we can help, or maybe you actually can help go back and establish freedom and justice in your own country.
I don't know. My mother has this great saying, it's going to end sad. And I think somehow because of the volume, numbers of people, and I've heard from 7,000 to 10,000, and I don't know where that number is. But I just don't know what's going to happen, and I'm very worried.
Yeah, and
the Mexico has already offered them asylum,
yes.
and they
So
turned it down.
we know it's not about asylum,
Right.
right? They're safe in Mexico, and from what we can see, they probably were actually safe where they were from. It appears to be a political move, because in Honduras, the present president, the previous one was removed from office,
Right.
and there is this conflict going on, and it looks like that previous president's supporters are involved with this whole movement
Oh, really?
to cause turmoil not only in Honduras but also in America. So we've got some situations. I'm kind of concerned that our Justice Department doesn't have more information, or maybe they do, I just don't know about it, which would be fine,
Right.
because I probably
You
shouldn't.
hope they do.
But I'm looking at, we should have people on the ground within who know what's going on, where the money's coming from, where all the food and water and the outhouses, all that stuff is
Right,
coming from
right.
somewhere. We should have feet on the ground collecting information as to where all this is coming from.
Yeah. I am with you. I'm sincerely hoping they know that and choosing not to share with us.
I hope so too.
Because if you think about not having any of those things you mentioned, it'd be pretty ugly.
So, you know, the root source of what's behind this invasion, I'll use the word invasion,
Right?
that's what we have to deal with, that root. It might not necessarily be the present president of Honduras, but there is something going on there and something being fed into it. We need to go there and deal with the root.
What's concerning me is I've heard discussions about another group
Yeah.
forming. So if we let this group in, I know what's going to happen. There'll be another group and another group. And once you let one group in, how do you not say yes to everybody else? That's very bad.
So that's where we're heading to.
Okay.
So let's see, the common defense, including the borders, the general welfare, which means whatever we act on is for the welfare of the whole country, not just certain few people.
Right.
And that's very well explained in the Vermont Constitution. And what I've mentioned before was in the United States Constitution, the 10th Amendment says whatever is not regulated to the federal government in the Constitution is for the states to decide. So what I like to do is read the United States Constitution with the Vermont Constitution in my hand, because it fills in a lot of the gaps. You know, and this thing about the common defense in the Vermont Constitution, Article 7, defines what that is, about being it's for the whole
Right,
group of
all the
people,
people.
not just certain
Right,
groups.
Right.
So I like that. And to secure the blessings of liberty, okay, liberty and justice for all. That's what my job's going to be. It's
Had a big
that's
job.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it turns into a big job. So yeah.
I must say, and I'm sure you've looked at, I'm going to say something I'm going to get into trouble for, but some of our judges don't seem to be applying the law as I might apply to some of the cases they've been hearing lately of, sexual abuse against children and other things. They're very not as strong as I would.
Mhm.
As I would
Loose
perhaps,
and,
yes, and I'm
we-
surprised at that, I guess. But
And we have the problem of legislating from the bench.
right,
And yeah, they're to follow up on what we pass. But we're really supposed to pass what we believe is constitutional laws.
and they're
If
supposed to
we're
apply it.
mistaken, they can correct us.
right, exactly. So you've talked about healthcare a couple of times, and I know what are your views on the healthcare?
So my healthcare views is, our first of all, I separate healthcare from sick care.
Oh, interesting.
So what most people are talking about as healthcare is actually sick care. Our sick care system is like overloaded,
Right,
right? Because there's so many sick people. So I just say, well, why don't we make healthy people, right? So the whole concept of eating right, drinking clean water,
Right.
breathing clean air, eating clean food, we do organic,
right,
organic everything. Because these chemicals that are used in the food processing, I believe, are part of what's causing
Yeah.
some of the diseases.
yeah, I agree with you.
Like we talked about the deal in Hoosick Falls, New York, and
Yeah.
North Bennington
Yeah.
with the water stuff. And even so, it gets right back into the whole food production system in the country. Now, if you narrow down Vermont, it's a little bit easier to deal with in Vermont because we already have a big step forward in the organic industry. So going forward with that, not only is it your food, but also we use herbs and oils and different
Yeah.
things for our health, right? And what we recognize is there are equipment now that you put on and it measures your body frequencies, basically. Every part in your body operates at its own resonant frequency, every piece. So it's like you can put these devices on you and it listens to you like a radio receiver. It goes through all the
Right,
different
right.
frequencies, sees how your body's resonating. For your height and size, your spleen should be doing this, your lungs should be doing this, your heart should be doing this, and even the valves in your heart.
Right,
When they listen to you with a stethoscope, they're listening to sound frequencies,
right.
right? Or the ultrasound, it's sound. It's all this sound stuff. So these machines do the same thing, only you get the ones that you are not audible to the ear. So from that point, if something's not functioning where you believe it should be, it can be tinged slightly off frequency to see if it responds. So what's interesting about it is that all foods have this same law of science, natural law of science. So like a carrot, for instance, it has its own resonant frequency and harmonics thereof. Harmonics count, which is multiples of the frequencies. And that's how the naturopath would prescribe what food you're lacking or what herb you need to use or what oil. It's really good, and it feeds the organ. So this is all bringing to health.
right,
So if you like say you need heart surgery, all right, we're talking naturopath versus allopath. If you need heart surgery, you're going to go in the hospital. The allopaths are going to take care of you. You are going to be on pharmaceuticals because you're going to be put under. It's a big deal.
right,
So the goal is when you come out of heart surgery and come back and you stabilize, you're going to be on pharmaceuticals. But the goal is to switch you back over to health.
right,
Right? A lot of what's going on is once you get on the pharmaceuticals hold you there. Sometimes they cause other things to stop working, like your liver, which causes another situation, another pharmaceutical. Then this other thing stops working, another pharmaceutical. So you end up with this list of
right. So your whole focus is prevention.
is
Right, I mean,
prevention
just to
and
stop it
then
before it happens.
get back on to
Right,
health. And
right.
that would relieve a huge strain on the sick care department, which is present. So it's, do we feed sickness or do we feed health? And we all complain about how much money it costs. Well, it's you save the most money is if you don't have to use it.
Right,
Right? And that's our goals too.
Right.
So that's what my goal is too. And what I think should happen in health class in high school, it should be in high school, is to teach these herbs and how your body
Right,
functions,
right.
how metabolism occurs in your body at a pace where the student can absorb it. Because when I first learned biology, it was just overwhelming for me. But after I got older and went slowed down, it was like, oh, now I'm starting to get this. And if it's told in a way the student can understand it, that's where we need to go.
Well, and I think Vermont is clearly ahead of the other states because we have the farm to plate movement. So we're already recognizing natural food off of a farm to your plate is a good thing. Good thing to
We
do.
are, the community farms. You
right.
go around, most of these towns will have a co-op
Yep,
in them.
right.
And it's good food. People think I'm nuts. I'm a conservative going in a health food store. It's like, well, you got to go there if you
Right.
want to eat
That's
healthy.
right. Exactly.
Why should I basically sicken my body?
Right.
And when I get talking with them, there's a few coming around, but
But I think we did a show on opioids. I did a couple of shows on it, and one of them was entitled Wellness. And the people that I had on were talking about alternative approaches to get people off of the opioids, whether it be massages or eating and what they should eat. And they really focusing on alternatives rather than the hardcore medicine as you're talking about. So I think the medical profession is starting to come around that maybe all these pills and drugs aren't, in the long term, are not good for you, that you should be thinking about wellness and prevention. I was actually surprised, and it's starting to be covered by insurance, which is great.
This is where we need to go.
Right, exactly.
Because insurance companies are going to save money too.
Right, exactly.
In the long run, and our healthcare spending accounts, we need to be able to spend it on healthcare.
Exactly. I agree
And
with you.
the one thing also that helps is love, right? Compassion.
There you go.
This thing saves a lot of people.
Right. That's cool.
If we could capitalize on that
I wish
somehow.
you luck with that.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
Scream that one from there. So let's talk a little bit about international. And you and I had a chat about Islam, and I was actually going to pull you aside one day and have that conversation in depth because I found it fascinating. So
Yeah.
maybe you could talk about Islam.
So, a lot of people look at Islam as a religion. I look at it beyond that, and I look at it more as a nation that has its own national religion that drives everything it does. So, not to confuse Islam as a nation with the Nation of Islam. They're two different things, all right? The Farrakhan thing is totally different than Islam is. So, Islam as a nation, the way I see it, there are many states within the Islam nation, this thing that wants to become the nation. And Islam is a nation that knows no borders. We need to start right there because this whole no border thing, I believe it is an influence of this Islam nation that knows no borders. And Islam as a nation, as a religion-driven nation,
Right.
wants to cover the whole world. It's very similar to what Jesus said, to go out throughout the whole world.
Right.
Islam is
Right.
very similar to that. So what goes on in Islam as they go through, each state has its own state religion, version of the religion
Oh,
of Islam. They're all a little bit different. That's why you see Sunni versus Shiite and the many different states wars,
yeah.
right? It's because, ISIS wants to be head of this. Well, no, Boko Haram wants to be head of this. And so you have all these different aspects of who wants to be in charge, and they have these wars. And, that's where Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and the Taliban, all these different things are. All wanting to be the head of the nation.
Right.
And that's what's going on right now. Even Turkey, Iran, the whole thing.
Right.
And that journalist that just got killed
Yep.
in Turkey, he was part of the Muslim Brotherhood. And what the Muslim Brotherhood is trying to do is bring democracy into the Islamic nations so that they can vote. Well, the Islamic nations are headed by monarchies, basically, right now. And no,
Voting's not
that
good
wouldn't
for them.
work. And recognizing that, not overthrowing them, but recognizing who they are and respecting who they are and seeing why they ended up here I think is very important. Respect for other people's nations and to learn why and what. So this whole Muslim Brotherhood thing that happened with this reporter and all, the deal with this reporter was he was very free speaking. And we could get information from him and learn a lot of stuff. It's too bad what happened
Right.
because some of his articles are very free. And you can learn, which we need to do. So we keep going there and understanding what's going on. And it's a whole political swing. And the politics of jihad, right? Military jihad is 3% of jihad. Then you have stealth jihad, which is working in peace, right? Because we're looking at this foreign nation wanting to take over the world. Operating in America is what we're talking about. So how do you do it? Through peace. You have political jihad, Huma Abedin, right? Getting right involved in the deep end of politics.
Right.
Jihad of the womb, population growth, right? Marriage through finances, oil money is huge, right? Banking, Sharia law, immigration, the education. If we look into who is now the owners of the education and of the news agencies, we'll see a big influence. And it's pretty interesting how far along we are. And this information came from an ex-terrorist from Lebanon. That's where I got this information from. It's Qum Ministries, and he has a very free publication. And it's really interesting. But some of the things we deal with when we're dealing with Islam is they have these three things. One, El-Taqiyya, El-Maruna, and El-Kitma. Right?
What is that?
El-Qatiyya means it's basically the ends justify the means. You don't have to tell the truth in order to get what you want. It's very dangerous because how can we trust this person? Are they telling the truth or they just want to get what they want? It's allowed in this prescribed ways of doing things. El-Maruna is when facing an enemy, make up any story to befriend your enemy, smile in their face, but curse them behind your back.
Right.
These are dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to befriend these people. It's like, can we trust them?
Right.
So you have to always be aware of what's going on. And then El-Kitma is use peaceful Mecca or radical Medina when necessary. So Mecca is where Muhammad was peaceful. Medina is where he turned violent. So the radical Islamic follow Medina because it happened after Mecca. And in the Quran, whatever happened latest overtakes what happened earlier. And that's where the peaceful thing is the early part of the Quran. But as you go on, it ends up in violence. So
Interesting.
the terrorists believe you got to follow the whole thing to the end.
Right.
So this is where we're dealing with, and you don't know who you're dealing. You got to be aware and cautious. Take a step
It's
back.
all about globalization, right? And that
It
for
is.
some reason, there's a lot of people here in the United States that are very interested in globalization rather than
Nationalization.
nationalization. And I struggle with that. I think being global would be not good. Would be a disaster
Yeah.
because who's in charge?
Yes. And the whole multicultural thing.
Yeah.
You know, I like multicultural things, but if you do away with all the cultures, you won't have multicultural. We'll all just be the same.
Right?
It's like, how boring would that be in life?
Well,
Right?
if we went to globalization, we'd all be under the same rules and the same-
Exactly.
right?
Boy, there's nothing more exciting than going overseas and not knowing what in the world to expect. It's like,
Exactly.
wow.
Yeah.
Are you at the mercy of a higher power at that point? And I think it's good.
Yeah.
I
Well,
enjoy it.
I think we need diversity only because of ideas, how people look at things. Decisions are made better when there's different ideas. But globalization is another thing altogether. So just talking about what other we have here, gun control. I think.
Yeah, let's do that
let's do gun
because
control.
you know, the Second Amendment and the Article 16 in Vermont, you know, that's why I came to Vermont. There was two gun laws. You have the right to bear arms and you have the right to not bear arms.
Right.
I thought that was great.
Right, and it served us well.
It has.
Good.
So what happened recently started with the gun shoot in Florida, and it spilled over onto Jack Sawyer and into the Vermont
Right.
laws in Vermont.
Right.
And I got
Jack,
studying.
So Jack was the name of the young man in Fairhaven.
Yes,
Right,
in
that
Fairhaven
people
from
would remember. Yeah,
Poultney, I think it is.
right.
So I like studying root cause things, so I got investigating a few things. Plus, the governor posted his his interview online. So it's like, wow. So I grabbed that, of course. And when dealing with school shootings, which is something I think we have to go to,
Right,
I say school shooters are school children. There's something wrong in the schools.
right.
And our schools score very low on problem solving. Now, problem solving is where we need to score very high on for everything, even for healthcare, for
Right.
everything is problem solving. So I use the scientific method. You know, observe something, question it, how does it work, or why? The great why word, right?
Yep.
Observe it in nature and question why things work. Prong it a little bit and see what it does. Experiment, that's the
Right.
experiment. Observe what it does and come up with a conclusion based on your observations, and then question your conclusion and see if it holds true.
Right.
And same holds true for laws, making laws. If you make a law, you have to return to it and watch it and see what it did to society,
That's something
see
we
what it
never
did
do here.
to your nation.
Right.
If you don't do that, you didn't follow through on the scientific method, and guess what? You're just going to go who knows where. So you have to return to it and re-question and continue this question. Somebody has to, maybe not you, but maybe another citizen or something. That's the redress of grievance.
Yep.
So we need that. So where did we go wrong in problem solving? I was on the school board and I did the science curriculum and went through it all. So where I observed we went wrong in problem solving and abandoning the scientific method was when it came to they call it the theory, but I call it a hypothesis. The difference being a hypothesis is a thought, a theory is something that you can repeat. Repeat. So the hypothesis of evolution, in the process, when you did the science curriculum, everything was proposed in a question until we got to evolution. And it was changed to a statement. Prove the evolutionary tree true. And then, okay, let's come up with the experiment. And the board couldn't come up with an experiment, which included the science teachers. So we went through, got done with the science curriculum, and they said, oh, we're done. I said, no, we're not done. We left a blank. So we went back there, and sure enough, well, what's the experiment? Couldn't come up with an experiment. So it was like, look at this. Everything else in our curriculum starts with a question. This is a statement. So what did we do? We shut down the thought process of the student and told them this has already been, this is it. So the student thinks, oh, everything's already been discovered. I got nothing to do. And you know, that thought process carries through the whole science thing. Once they get it in their mind, oh, everything's been discovered. I've got nothing to do. It's like discouragement. Well, no, guess what? You need to challenge that thing. And you need to go into problem solving, use the scientific method, because everything has not been discovered, especially this health stuff.
Right.
Open it up and let it go. So in the process of why are we doing this, this is where the secular humanist progressive socialism comes in, which I call the root cause problem of the whole thing.
Can you
Now,
repeat those words again? There's a whole bunch of them there. I know-
Secular-
Secular,
humanistic,
humanistic.
progressive socialism. So secular humanistic means that there's no God.
Ah.
And I got a statement here from them on where they entered into the school districts from.
Because now we hear progressive socialism or something they're combining. Is that it?
Democratic
Yeah.
socialist,
Right.
which actually behind doors is progressive socialism.
Right.
Progress to what?
Right.
The next step is communism. So this is from the Secular Humanist magazine from 1983, right? And I'm convinced that the battle for humankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers that correctly perceive their role as proselytizers of a new faith, a religion of humanity that recognizes and respects the spark of what theologians call divinity in every human being. The classroom must and will become an arena of conflict between the old and the new. The rotting corpse of Christianity, together with all its adjacent evils and misery, and the new faith of humanism, resplendent with the promise of a world in which the never realized Christian ideal of love thy neighbor will finally be achieved. So this was the secular humanist experiment in the public school system, and that's what's there. So this ideal of love thy neighbor, they failed, right? You look at society, they failed.
That is true.
And that's what's still being the base of what's being taught in the public school system and in the universities. This is why we're seeing this crazy stuff in Berkeley and in Middlebury, where the professor got whacked in the head.
Right.
It's like,
What
come
is
on,
that?
folks.
Right.
There's a redress of grievance, and in the Constitution it says peaceful.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't say.
I was surprised at that because it was Middlebury and it's Vermont.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that professor, she's a Democrat, and when I watched her interview, it's like, man, I haven't liked a Democrat in so long. This person was very refreshing. And I think what the reason
What
was,
was she speaking about if she was Democrat that they didn't like?
well, she's a political science professor.
Yeah?
Now, I don't like to use the word political and science in the same sentence. I think that's an oxymoron.
Right.
But if we could return to that, which is what I'm talking with this whole PID Luke Governor thing,
Right.
bringing science back into the perspective because you're searching for the real truth.
Right.
She was doing that because her original profession was a mathematician. Mathematicians, I believe, are scientists because we have to use that math in our
Sure.
electricity and all. So she's using this in her political teaching. She became a political science professor. And it's like, oh, you have to have opposing sides. You have to.
Oh.
Otherwise, you're going to flop
She
over.
was for free speech or something?
Yeah, well, she was for the whole
Right,
thing
right.
because like I said before, you get one side and you flop over and you go out of control
That's
and break. So she was bringing in the other side, well,
Anarchy.
anarchy.
Yes.
And she got in the middle of it,
Wow.
trying to protect this guy and walking with him, and she just got whacked. It was,
Well, I will tell you, you were talking about following up after something's been accomplished or passed. In the legislature, they pass a bill, and that's it.
On
And
to
they
the
never
next
go
one.
back and never look, well, should we tweak it this way to make it work better? How's it working? We never do that. We say, well, hey, we passed that last year. Well, it's not working. But they don't go back and revisit it. Unless it's something right in your face, they won't do it.
so I need to add in Jack Sawyer's comment.
Yeah.
Jack Sawyer said, you can say, in regard to the Florida shooting,
Right?
you can say that, but I think the human population sucks. So I like to hear about cases of natural selection.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, I wish humans would go extinct, like I don't care. It is natural selection because it's getting rid of the dumb people by getting shot. It's just natural selection taken up a notch.
Well, he's had an interesting life to come to that conclusion.
Yeah, so where does he learn this stuff
I
from?
don't know.
Right, the natural selection,
Right?
and the humans are like a plague on the earth.
Right?
Where do you hear that
That's
from?
very sad. He's a teenager, isn't he? He's
Well, he's
I think
he's
like
probably
19
19 by now.
Yeah.
But that's what they're taught in school.
Yep.
And the whole environmentalist movement about humans are a plague on the earth or just bad for the earth.
Right.
It's like, that's what he's been taught. It's like, we're doing this. We're doing this crazy stuff to the kids. And the Columbine thing was about kids who didn't like God.
Right.
And the shooting in Virginia, at Virginia Tech, was similar.
Right.
And they're not all that way. I haven't studied the Florida shooter. They weren't available yet when I was doing the studies. But we have to go there and see what causes,
right,
the root
right.
cause of what's driving these people.
Don't you think a lot of it is some kind of mental illness or something? Because that is a huge problem, I think, certainly in Vermont, but I think in the United States,
Yes.
the mental health aspects of our lives, there's something,
Well, depression
something's happening.
is huge. Then if you get put on pharmaceuticals for depression, what are the side effects? They're pretty bad side effects.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons I'm for medical marijuana, is to get people off these
Yep,
depressant
yep.
drugs and these drugs that have side effects that make them go pretty crazy. You know, just give them some marijuana, calm them down a little bit. Pharmaceutically wise, I believe would help the situation. But yeah, we need to go there.
Now, you talked a lot about marijuana in your Facebook. So you're for medical marijuana, but do you support the commercialization of it?
I'm 100% for medical marijuana throughout the country. The recreational use, I believe, should be left to the states.
Okay.
And I would like to keep it illegal for interstate commerce.
Interesting.
And I have a little bit reason why. And Monsanto's and the people who can manipulate food
Right.
through DNA processes, I don't think we need to go there. You know, nationwide, make up this powerful thing. No, let the states deal with it individually. If this state doesn't want to have it, that's fine. But to go nationwide, I think we'd just be making a lot
I
of
think you can control
stupidness.
quality better that way, I would think. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's a smaller, you're looking at Vermont or Maine or whatever.
In Vermont, it'd be more natural.
Yep.
And I'm a naturalist, and but at the same time, we need to respect and protect employers. If they fire somebody for improper use, they're gone. This ain't my right to get high or whatever whenever I want to.
Right.
It's really detrimental in that respect. And if you're high, you're not going to learn. It's a learning curve. You're not going to make it through. Man, if you want to be content where you are, fine. But if you want to go forward, you better watch what you're doing, because you're going to affect your learning abilities.
Yes, I think the little gray cells disappear, don't they? And younger kids anyway.
Yeah,
and
and
teenagers.
I
it does something.
fired people for using it
Oh, really?
at my home, helping me cut firewood.
Oh.
Not that they were my employees, but it's like, no, you're not.
Yeah. With
Get
the
out of
axe.
here. You're not running a chainsaw on
Yeah,
my
right.
tractor.
Right.
No, I'm not going. I'm not going there.
Good decision. Good decision. So I guess I wanted to talk to you about if you're lucky enough to get the job and you become the senator, what would we see different in the way you handle the job as opposed to as it's being handled now? Of course, you wouldn't be running for president and all over the nation.
Yeah. I would probably focus more on some issues that I think are important, right? The federal deficit. I think the last time we spoke about
Yep,
that,
yes,
right? We're at
you can certainly talk about
2.7
that.
trillion.
Yep.
GDP is 20.6. Our dollar is based on our GDP. That's what gives it its wealth.
Right.
And we're beyond that. So what gives that extra 5% its wealth? You know, it's just trust.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when the trust disappears?
How would you attack the deficit? It is so huge.
The
I
first
don't
thing-
know how you even would attack it.
The first thing, well, Donald Trump already got going on
Yes, he's
lowering
got
the
some, right.
taxes should bring revenue in, which
Yeah.
it's doing by increasing the economy,
Right.
by not taking
Because
it
he's
away
bringing
from
in
people.
more revenue rather
Yes,
than, right,
so that
spending.
is going up. That's first. It's being done. Next, we have to look at our spending. And then at the same time, though, I would need to get in contact with the Federal Reserve about our money. What gives it its value, what the Federal Reserve thinks the collapsing point is,
Yep.
and how we're going to avoid that too, because they're part of it.
Because if some of the nations that we owe money to actually came to us and said, time to pay up, we'd be in deep yogurt,
Yes.
wouldn't we? I mean,
Yes.
we owe a lot of people that could call in that loan anytime they want.
So, you know, originally our money was gold and silver. It had its own intricate, whatever the word is,
Value.
its own value. Now we don't have that. Now we have a piece of paper. And it was backed by whatever was in the mint. So the value of the dollar based on the gross domestic product, we need to understand what gives the dollar its value. And the people of the country need to understand it also. Because if we lose the value of our dollar, hyperinflation, we're going to have some turmoil.
Right.
And that's not my job. My job is to, for the domestic tranquility, not turmoil. So we need to all come together on, let's not collapse our money system, because I don't want to go
Good
there.
idea.
You know,
Right.
my other thing is avoid a civil war. Well, this
Right.
is would probably push us over the edge. But we need to understand that and apply our governor and regulation system so we come back, not too fast, so we break things, but we need to come back in
Yeah.
in value with our
I don't
money.
know how many people understand when it comes time to lift the ceiling, we've already committed that money. They don't have much choice because the Congress has already passed these bills that have held us to promises that we're going to spend X bucks in this and X bucks in that. So you almost have to raise the ceiling, otherwise we're in default of our promises. So
Right.
they have got to stop spending money on that side
It's
of
the
the
spending side. So, you know, we could look at things, and part of the spending problem is the refugees coming over the border.
Right.
It upsets me to see old people's socialist security. I call it socialist security, sorry, but
Don't
you know,
don't mess with that.
we put all that money in there our whole lives, and it's really our money.
Right.
But that money's being used for the refugees,
Right.
taken away from these elderly people who are being shoved into a facility, 3 or 4 in a small area. It's like,
The housing.
come
right,
on,
right.
this is sick.
Yeah.
Just so we can waste it over
And I would
there.
throw in our vets to that one too, right? The
Yes.
way we treat them.
So we've got serious situation we've got to look at, you know, and I'm willing to go there.
Good for you.
And it's huge.
So, you have talked a lot about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and I applaud you for that, because not too many candidates are talking about that. But that is who we are. That's the basis for how this nation was formed.
Yep.
And I think those guys are pretty smart. They
Amazingly.
They just about thought of absolutely everything.
Well, you know which one's my favorite one?
What?
Would be Benjamin Franklin with the electricity
Oh,
from the
yes,
lightning
yes,
bolt.
right.
Yeah, right?
That's it.
It's like this guy knew about electricity back
Yeah,
then.
Right.
It's like, wow. And Thomas Jefferson with all
Why do
those
you think we're
engineering
not
things.
paying attention as much as we should? Is it just easier not to because
think
it's
we're
standing in our way?
naive.
Huh?
And it's a shame because there's another.
I don't think we teach it in school anymore, do we?
Oh, I was just going to say
Oh,
that.
right,
There's
sorry.
another reason, the whole indoctrination thing.
Right.
And our founders were no good. Really, John Adams said our Constitution is good only for religious and moral people.
Yep.
So if the enemy saw that all we got to do is make people non-religious and non-moral, the thing will collapse.
Yeah.
And that's really where we are, and what's going on in our university system and public school system. That's what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean the teachers, but I mean that driving force behind the curriculum.
Right.
And try going there, right?
Yeah.
We got to go there.
Yeah, we do.
And why aren't we teaching about our foundations? They have another agenda.
Yeah.
And, you know, the Constitution tells me what I can do. The Bill of Rights tells me what I have to keep my hands off of. The Declaration of Independence tells me why. Because they're endowed by our Creator, and I'm not the Creator.
Right.
So when I ask these youngsters, well, where do your rights come from? It's like, man, you're missing a lot here, you know?
Right.
And
Because I
even,
love when they're trying to change our history. I'm very big on all the removal of statues and very big against it.
Mhm.
Because you learn from history. You learn from our mistakes and you learn from our successes.
Yeah.
But you can't erase it. You can't do that.
And we've had some mistakes, but the Constitution had written in it the ability to amend those mistakes.
Right.
So it's there. It's already there.
Right.
All we need to do is continue on, and you know we've continued to continue on. So it's a good document, and it's our foundation to stand on.
I wish they would teach that. I think civics in general. I spent a year. I sort of volunteered with a private school to teach the kids how bills are made and how to go to the State House and follow the process through. And they just don't teach that kind of stuff. And the kids loved it. They just loved it because they learned about Vermont and who's who in the political zoo, from the governor to lieutenant governor. They don't know any of that.
I'll tell you a little story. I went to Desiree Moore, and she had an
Oh,
event last
yes,
weekend, so I
right.
went to it. And well, one of my things, I had a whole bunch of flags. The Battle of Bennington flag,
Oh.
the Gadsden flag with the snake
Right.
on it, don't
Oh,
tread
yes,
on
right.
me, and a whole bunch of Green Mountain Boy flags, the little ones, you know. So the kids love flags. So I started handing them out to kids, and I got down to almost my last one. And I was out wandering around, and this young girl, she was probably in 8th grade, I'm going to say. I think she was. I asked her. She was in 8th grade. So she saw the flag. I said, hey, this is my last flag. Would you like it? Well, what is that flag? I said, it's the Green Mountain Boy flag. You know, Ethan Allen. Have you studied about Ethan Allen yet?
No.
No.
Wow.
I said, what grade you in? It's 8th grade. I said, oh, I think you're going to study about Ethan Allen this year. You know, and the books about Anne's story and her life, and Molly Stark,
Right? Oh,
and
Molly
General Stark,
right,
her husband,
right.
and those stories, and they're just so rich
Yeah.
into who we are.
Right. I know. It's
You got to teach those,
Yeah.
and especially with Anne's story, the mother of the Green Mountain Boy. She was tough,
Yeah.
and
There's some great stories in this state.
that toughness still resides,
Yep.
and it's like that's what Vermont is. You know, it's like exciting. I love it.
That's great. So we have 2 minutes. Would you like to say anything to the audience about why they should vote for you? And
Well, probably my biggest thing I got going for me is I'm not there. I haven't been to the university and indoctrinated into other things to hate our country.
Right.
And I've been working my whole life. I'm 60 years old. And I did my time in the military. I took the oath. In boot camp, they taught us what the oath meant and about the Constitution, so we knew what we were getting into, what we were willing to die for. And, you know, we see things falling apart, and it's time to get back and give my part. And so here we go. So my biggest benefit is that I'm not a politician, I'm not a lawyer.
whoa.
All right?
Right.
Maybe they need something like that in Washington. And they're just going to go talk with people.
Good for you, Bruce. I wish you a lot of luck. I wish you luck tonight at the debate.
Oh, yeah, that should be fun.
Yeah, that'll be good. So listen, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, keep listening beyond the sound bites.